in the processes in which we do, giving us ideas on what we can move forward and helping the industry. One of the big things that we were challenged with was taking thermal cameras and creating basically maps, thermal maps, and data analytics to produce for our customers. Some of the problems that we run into with trying to do this is that radiometric data versus JPEG data, those are two entirely different setups as far as what the images are taking and the data that is collected. When you do standard JPEG, that's not much different, or our RGB cameras is just stitching the color representation of thermal. We can get a lot of variances in there, you know, depending on the thermal, what each picture is taking, and trying to normalize the image makes it very difficult on that end if we don't use radiometric data to do the stitch. Probably the one of the most common things I get in radiometric stitching is the trying to put together a large, huge area, and that is not anything that is recommended with this specific camera, which we'll be talking about today, the XT. To try to map 500 acres or something like that is very difficult to gather that much data. If you can fly high enough, perfectly fine. You can get a lot of images and everything else. But if we have to collect a lot of specific temperature data, that becomes a little bit more difficult because of how much data is actually obtained, and we can move forward to doing thermal stitching, but the presentation of it, the way it might be coming across, and the time it takes to do it all, you can end up spending 2 or 3 days trying to map 500 acres, and your data is not going to be the same. So not much different than trying to image something in the morning versus the afternoon versus the late evening. All of those images, to try to compile them together in a matter of speaking with thermal doesn't always work really well. Well, we're introducing Raptor Maps here. These guys are MIT graduates, very smart. We love working with them. We've sent out some cameras to them to get some data and collect some of the issues we were running with the other guys, Drone Deploy, Pix4D. These guys have tried to create some thermal stuff, but basically the concentration with Raptor Maps, you know, making deliverables and listening to how to try to culture. If they have reached out to you already, if they've talked to you about processing, not in just RGB, but specifically in thermal, this is them gathering information to try to listen to the industry as well. So we're really excited about showing what they have to offer, and the analytics of doing this type of, or the problems of doing this type of imagery. But let's go ahead and get started with them. Mikkel, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, John.
Okay, can we hear Mikkel there? Chad, good to go? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and give the time over. We'll be trying to answer as many questions as we can during the presentation. This is set up to about an hour, but we can hang out for a little bit longer and answer some of the more specific questions if we need to. So let's just see what we have what Raptor Maps can basically help us do. And their team is, again, has been super helpful in trying to move forward the industry, which keeps asking for this type of product. So let's see what they have to offer. And not only, Mikkel, does your company do just thermal, you do offer other things as well, correct?
Yes, that's right. And so I think you touched on something really important, which was, you know, what is the right deliverable and the right workflow depending on the type of job you're doing and depending on what your customer wants. And so, you know, are you doing kind of are you doing a 20-acre substation? Are you doing something over 500 acres? And we'll talk through what your different options are and how to have that conversation with your clients so that you know exactly what they want and you can provide it to them.
Right. So probably very common questions that I get with people trying to do this type of work is really not understanding the actual camera, how to gather the information, how to actually submit it to get it processed. They're trying to process internally. So hopefully some of those questions and the challenges that you guys deal with in doing this type of work, people have an understanding of how to get the reports out and how to do on how you're able to offer this to those types of clients as well. So,
all right.
Okay. let me just go ahead and give that to you, my man, and we'll go from there.
All right, are you guys able to see my screen?
There we go.
Here we go. All right.
Webcam.
All right. Looks like we're good. Yeah, so as John promised, it's not only myself here today, but also Eddie, my co-founder and CTO.
Yeah, how's it going? Thanks for having us here today.
Yep, so between the two of us, we're going to tell you a little bit about Raptor Maps and then hopefully answer as many questions as we can about radiometric orthomosaics, as well as anything else, both thermal or inspection related. So a little bit of our history. As John mentioned, we kind of specialize in data post-processing. We do a lot of machine learning. Before focusing exclusively on software, a couple of years ago, we actually have a good amount of experience building hardware with both integrated thermal cameras and computer vision cameras for some very specific applications. Originally, it was in agriculture, but we had a lot of people and a lot of colleagues start asking to use our software to process their data and create deliverables for that, and we noticed that that was a real need in the industry. So we started gearing up towards doing that and basically solving a lot of the problems for both drone professionals who are just starting off and buying a lot of this equipment, really trying to understand what they can provide to their clients and can they do it in a cost-efficient manner. Engineers, there are a lot of engineering company, architecture, construction, and engineering firms that have drone programs that want to incorporate this type of data into their workflow. There are companies doing operations and maintenance, and even asset owners. So there are lots of people who are really trying to figure out what is the best way to incorporate drones. And it's really interesting because we'll be talking to, sometimes we'll be talking to drone professionals, other times large asset owners, and sometimes the knowledge, there isn't very much of a knowledge gap when it comes to applying drones. It's kind of, everyone seems to be on the same page right now. So let's talk quickly about the best practices for making radiometric orthomosaic. So first of all, as John mentioned, when I say thermal map, I really mean radiometric ortho, as in every pixel has the temperature value embedded in it. And so the only way to make that is to start from that type of data, which is radiometric data. Now you don't have to scribble furiously. These are on our blog, but you'll see that these aren't hard and fast rules. But these are, from what we've seen from working with a lot of different drone service providers, these are what we've seen give your drone maps, your thermal maps, the best chance of coming out and looking really good, something you'd be proud to show one of your clients. So on the camera side, radiometric cameras are obviously required. It's got to output a RJPEG or a thermal TIFF. In terms of the lenses, you don't want a fisheye lens, nor do you want one that's so zoomed in that you're out there all day trying to create a map. The higher you fly, the better, which is what we've seen. So generally, if you fly at 200 feet, your map's going to turn out pretty good. One of the big things that we've seen is data verification. A lot of times people come back after a day and they'll send us a data set and they're really excited and they'll say, hey, can you take a look at this? And we hate to be the bearer of bad news, and we'll say, hey, that's not radiometric. Notice that it's colorful. Notice it's not the right resolution. Things like that. So make sure you verify your data in the field. And then lastly, the analysis part. Are you making the deliverables that your clients actually want, that they need, and are you challenging them to push the boundaries of what they can do? And that's where we'll really focus today. So yeah, let me switch over. I'll kind of dive into how we approach the problem. But before we get started here, are there any questions? All right, let me switch over. Oh, yes, Eddie reminded me I forgot to introduce where we are. So we're broadcasting from Greentown Labs, which is the largest clean tech incubator in the US. So that's where our headquarters is based, in Somerville, right outside of downtown Boston, a couple miles. So it's been great for us because we actually have a lot of our colleagues who are working on solar, wind power, things like that. And so when it comes to understanding the development and what the asset owners are looking for, we can just pop over and talk to them. So if you guys are ever in the area, open invitation to come and see, come and tour.
Okay, I do have a poll question we can do while you're doing that. Basically, just how do we use thermal today? So let me get that launched there, if everybody can see that. Is the poll question showing up there, Chad? Okay. we go. So one question is just how do you use thermal today? I mean, are we doing inspection in general use? Are we doing SAR, public service? Considering doing roofing, solar? And the never question is kind of falls into like I've never done it, or this is why I'm here trying to get some idea on whether or not I can give this service to my customers. What I've seen in the industry a lot is that some of the inspection people are not actually drone service providers that are querying the actual company, but internally we're seeing a lot of guys that are doing this that already work for a large inspection company and adding this to their toolbox. So that might fall into your general use inspection answer. So just some of the poll question I'm seeing is that most people are just doing general inspection, maybe looking at a way to do kick it out. SAR is at 20%, 17 in roofing, solar 26, and the other big one is I've never done it at 36%. So thanks for answering that question, and we will continue on. I'll catalog all those and good to go.
All right. Yeah, so here we have so the concept of a funnel. So when it comes to processing your data, you want to make sure that you're keeping really good track of it and that you're isolating the data you want to create a report based on. So when I say report, I mean the deliverable that you're going to be giving to your client. So a lot of drone service providers right now, you might be either using cloud services like Dropbox or something like that, or you may just have a lot of hard drives that are kind of piling up at home. And what we noticed is that a lot of times there tended to be separate workflows for separate types of data. So, if you had thermal data, you'd automatically have to load all that into FLIR tools. And if you had, RGB data, you'd be, either creating a folder, editing it, or even some people dragging it into Microsoft Word or something like that and making annotations on that. So we said, well, people should be able to have a box where you can drag and drop any sort of data. And not only does it play nice with lots of different types of data, so everything from radiometric, thermal data to normal RGB, but you should be able to use this to sort your data. So if you already have thousands and thousands of images and you're trying to find something extremely quickly before you even put it up on a platform, can you sort it on a map and just isolate, what you actually want to upload? The other thing, the other part of our philosophy was making sure that people don't throw away any of their historical data. So we're data geeks because we love doing a lot of the machine learning, the predictive analytics stuff, and that relies on good historical data. So giving people the ability to sync their data from cloud-based services where they might already be storing it is pretty important. So then the second step for us was, okay, you went out, you flew, you've got all your data, what do you actually do with it? How do you sort it? How do you find it? I should mention that this example right here, I just want to say thanks to SST Solar. They're our friends, and they do some operations and maintenance. They build solar installations, so they were kind enough to let us use their example data set here. And I'll also show you some sample RMUS data as well. So on this interface, what drone professionals can do is they can toggle on and off all of their different upload sessions, and they can isolate both the upload session and the location that they care about. The time that they care about. So this is particularly good for, I want to compare what did this asset look like in June versus August, or maybe I want to incorporate all of the data into my report. And then finally, we want to be able to categorize it in some way, add different types of structures, add different boundaries, things like that. So for example, in agriculture, maybe you want to divide it by field. Maybe in solar, you want to be able to isolate the different types of farms. So you could say, well, this is the west farm. This is the east farm, and you want to have those types of things carried through to your final report. So the point here is the more you kind of pre-process your data, the easier it's going to be on the report side. So step 3 is, okay, I've got all my data, I've funneled down, what do I actually want to do with it? So let's take a look at a sample data set right here. So when it loads, what you're going to see is you're going to see a few different layers. You're going to see a thermal radiometric layer. You're going to see the RGB layer that corresponds to the solar field. And then you're going to see the base map underneath. So that's the actual satellite imagery it's being pulled from. And then, of course, you've got you've got the pins as well. So if you click on any individual pin, you can see this is the radiometric JPEG, and I'll show you what that interface looks like if you click into it. So for example, if I were to turn off the RGB, I can just isolate the thermal here, and I can make measurements on it. Notice that I labeled the west solar farm and the east solar farm here, and those measurements, those areas have already populated down here. Now, the other things you have available to you are the deliverables panel, which is up here, and we'll talk about the different types of deliverables you can generate. But one of the things that John mentioned earlier, which is the ability to take a really large area and hone in on parts that you care about. So you can do some analysis from your thermal map, but oftentimes it's really good, and this is why thermographers like working with the individual images, to be able to click into an individual image and actually do your analysis on that. And the reason for that is that you, just like normal structure from motion, you want to make sure that any analysis you do is on the actual single image, and you're not getting any sort of blending artifact. So it's a great deliverable. It's a great way to visualize everything that's going on and pick out anomalies, but when it comes to the actual analysis, you probably want to do that on the individual images.
So I maybe wanted to add right there, Cal, that when people do go out and do these thermal imagers, this is probably the biggest challenge that you can deal with, is trying to even radiometric stitch everything, then trying to get the detail after the stitch has all been done. So I like the fact that we're able to individually click on an image and then work with the tools that are provided by that portion to get the individual problem. So this is one of the neater features, rather than just doing a full radiometric stitch and then trying to analyze what's going on the whole thing. This trying to isolate each individual piece seems like a really good idea to me. So I'd like to hear anybody's thoughts on that if that's the case. So anyway, continue on.
Yep. And I should back up. I skipped kind of an important step here, which is, well, how do you go from all of these individual radiometric images to having this nice radiometric orthomosaic? And the answer is we made it as simple as a button click. So anytime you hit this expert button, you can create a lot of different deliverables from everything you've added to this report. That's why so much effort is put into curating which images go into it. And then it's as simple as you just hit create radiometric map, and you can confirm it, and then it'll be ready within a day. Most of the time, less than that. You can also do the same for RGB imagery. What we've noticed is that people sometimes will have their preferred structure from motion programs or their workflows where they're doing kind of the RGB maps, and sometimes they may have already paid for that, and we totally get that. And so what we've allowed people to do is say, okay, just add in your orthomosaics. If you've already generated an RGB base map from somewhere else, and you don't want to use the satellite base map in here, and you don't want to generate the RGB within Raptor Maps, you're more than welcome to do that as well. So it's really how do we make this the nexus to bring together all the different types of data that you need to analyze. So made that. So
essentially, you don't really need to actually do a thermal stitch after you've gathered the data and you've already got locations. You don't really need to do that. Is that kind of what you're saying there?
Well, what I'm saying is for the RGB maps, if you definitely don't necessarily need to do it, you can. It just depends on the deliverable your client's looking for. And then same for the thermal, it really depends on what you're trying to do with it. So sometimes, your client, and this is that conversation that you want to have with your client. Sometimes they may want it. I mean, drones are cool, right? Sometimes people just want it because they want it, for marketing material even, and we completely get that. Other times they're looking for a very specific analysis, and that the thermal map may or may not be an important part of that.
But a lot of times the thermal map gives you good situational awareness of the whole area, which is really hard to get when you're looking individually through each picture.
Yeah, very good.
You kind of brought up an important point, John, though, which is kind of that situational awareness, and Eddie, you said that as well. And so one of the tools that we made available was to be able to project out, where all your images are in 3D. And I'll show you a better example of this for a vertical structure, because this really comes through nicely. But the idea here is that if you're just trying to get a sense of, this part of my asset, what does that look like? And instead of having a folder full of images trying to say, well, where actually is that? We basically use all of the metadata from the image, so the latitude, the longitude, the relative altitude, and then the heading, to be able to project all those images where they need to be. So let me show you an example of some of the other things you can do on individual radiometric images. So this data set is actually available on the RMUS website last time I checked. And so what I really liked about it is it highlighted, almost right away from the RJPEG, you can see that there's a defective string here. And so what you can do is we have built in some tools. You can draw custom polygons, things like that. You can get the maximum, the minimum temperature, and you can compare these and say, yes, there is definitely a difference here. You can set the emissivity appropriately. You can change the different color palettes to how you want it move. So the idea here is, how do you work with this individual image, present it exactly how you want to present it, and then either move on to the next one or go image by image, however you want to do it. One other thing for the thermographers out there who you might have some people saying, this is good for at a basic level, but I need every single thing that's available to me in something like FLIR Tools. We've made it easy to just hit the download button. It downloads that image exactly as you uploaded it, and so if there's any one particular image you want to give a thorough workup, you can do it that way. All right, I'm going to skip to a vertical asset, and then we'll talk a little bit about deliverables. But as I do that, there's actually one other thing to mention, and this is something we've seen for a lot of drone service providers. So, John, when you polled everyone, you saw that a lot of people are saying, I've never done this before, but I want to get into it, right? I'm passionate about it, and I want to learn. And so what we found is that there are people that want to serve multiple industries, and they may not necessarily have spent 20 years building solar installations, or spent decades working on transmission structures for utilities, things like that. And so they want to take good data, but they want someone else to be able to go in and have access to that interface that I just showed you and add in their own annotations. And so we've made it so that you can add in what's called a contributor. So you can basically specify the email address. So here, this is our info address. You guys can all feel free to invite or to email us at it. And what it does is it sends an email invitation to that person and says, hey, this person, in this case the demo account, has invited you to go in and take a look at this report. And you can go in and annotate it. And of course, you can release that job to them. You can also revoke that job if you don't want them to have access anymore, and they don't have access to all your other drone data. So this is one of the things that questions that we get is, well, can you guys link me up with thermographers, or can you link me up with engineers and things like that? And so we've added the ability within the application to do that. And of course, if you're on the other side of it and let's say you're a thermographer and you want to really get into reviewing imagery for drone service providers, let us know. We're happy to have your name as part of our network.
Very good.
So I'm going to show you a vertical asset here just because I think that drives the point home a little bit in terms of how to do, and I will be posting a blog post on virtual inspections, and you guys can kind of get a sneak preview of that, because the idea here from working with asset owners is that when I send a person out in the field, they generally have binoculars when they're looking at that asset, and they can walk around it, and they can look up and down, and they can look left and right. And so if you can replicate that, that's really all we need. We don't necessarily need to generate a 3D point cloud or something like that. So that's nice to do if you have LiDAR, but that's not necessarily accessible today for most people. And so instead they said, well, if I can click to the different size that I want, and I can click into it, and I can add in my structures, where you'll see there's a CAD structure down there. That's really all I need to do. So we've listened to that, and that's kind of how that was our philosophy when building out this entire.
I think I had a discussion just recently with an asset person that the client, he was working with a drone service provider, and that provider was able to produce 3D cloud point and basically run a model through Pix4D kind of a thing. But he was saying, in general, it's a real whoop-de-doo type product. Ooh, that's really neat to be able to look at it. But not always is it a tool that they would use after even getting the full-on, you know, you can ortho around it and take a look at it and all that other stuff. It just seemed like for him it was more, I really don't need that information. So here, being able to kind of specifically click on that and have access, right, once again, back to individual images that are important to him, seemed a little bit more the way he wanted to have the deliverable. This might change a little bit between each of your clients or customers, but at least at the end of the day, this gives you that ability, instead of just generating a whole 3D report or a 3D whoop-de-doo, you know, fly around the imagery kind of report. This allowing you to do this is actually, again, another feature that he suggested having. So
yeah. No, that's a really good point, and we understand the fundamental tension, because a lot of times if you're, you know, when you're out there flying, you don't want to drive several hours back to try to collect data you might have missed. So the tendency is for, you know, drone professionals to give the asset owner way too much data, and so this kind of gives them a way to filter down. This gives you a way to filter down what you're giving them, and also gives them a way to interpret everything you're giving them, so they don't feel overwhelmed.
Exactly.
Yeah, the last thing before we talk about deliverables, which is really what it's all about, that I did want to point out was some of the photogrammetry aspects of it. So I also had a blog post the other day about single image photogrammetry that I think is a pretty powerful tool, especially when you're doing you know, kind of top-down nadir imagery. So I think this is really good for things like you know, flat roof inspections and things like that. Anytime you're orthogonal to the scene and you have either any sort of reference measurement or a really good idea of the distance, you can do things like this. And so this gets back to the whole paradigm of, you know, maps are great for situational awareness. Obviously, once you make a orthomosaic, you can do photogrammetry to your heart's content. But if you're looking for something quick that gives you not only the areas but also the temperatures, things like that, and allows you to do an assessment, this is a really good way to do it. A killer use case we found for this is like construction matting and things like that.
So I see a lot of different deliverables in which you can give, depending and based on what that client wants. You know, like I said, like you had mentioned, there's a lot of whoop-de-doo information that really doesn't mean much to them, and if you can kind of isolate exactly what they need, that's very helpful. So if you do have, just for my audience, if you do have experience with any of the Drone Deploy, Pix4D, I will be honest, I tried my best to try to get into this thermal side of things with them, and creating reports with that just didn't seem to go anywhere. So hopefully we'll, if you have experience with that, my question was, you know, go ahead and feel free to email me on some of the things that may or may not be things that we see here today, of tools that we might be able to use. So I do have a quick poll question that I'll throw in again, just a time of processing. So this might help Raptor Maps kind of culture how long it takes to get your data. I'll just go ahead and launch this poll question real quick. How much time do you spend post-processing your data? It seems like once you upload pictures into Raptor Maps and then they do their processing, that this could be helpful in trying to gather time and energy in which you have to do the processing. Is it on your own machine? Is it something that you send away and somebody sends back? This is more or less on your own processing time to be able to do, and then what do you do with the information once you have it? You know, how much time do you actually spend doing that? So I'm seeing 3% at less than 1 hour, so it seems like that is the reality of trying to do anything for less than an hour is not real. 44% on 1 to 2 hours and 58% on more than 2 hours. So if this is a way to save us time in getting the information over to these guys and then processing themselves, then giving that report back, I see some value in that. So just a little quick poll question there. Awesome.
Yeah. No, that's great. So, yeah, anything we can do to help save you guys time, because I know, when you're up in the air and collecting data, the more you can say yes to jobs, the better. A lot of times we'll have people come to us and they just want a big contract or something like that, but instead of going out and celebrating and popping champagne, all of a sudden they get really concerned because they're doing the math on their previous jobs and saying, this is going to take me, way longer than I actually have to process all this data. And so that's where we step in and can really help them out. So, yep, let's talk about the different ways you can deliver data to your client, and then we can kind of highlight what we've seen work for different industries. So first and foremost is being able to give your client the link to what you're seeing on this site without needing any sort of special software or anything like that. So literally give them that report link. It's just like a really fancy version of a Dropbox link, and they can go in and they can see the read-only version of the report. They can play around with the temperature sliders, things like that. They don't need to know about Fluger tools or anything. They can just interact with your radiometric data. There's a KML option. So this is really good for everyone who's doing things from ArcGIS, so kind of pretty sophisticated clients, all the way to people who may not even have any sort of special software, but they kind of just want to open it in Google Earth. Now, originally, I think you guys might remember at the beginning I mentioned coming from agriculture in the way early days, and so part of the philosophy there was being able to deliver data to people with that might have low bandwidth. And so we made it so that this Google Earth file is really a KML file. It's incredibly small. It's only a few kilobytes. You can use those different tags to only toggle on and off the pins you want. And when you click on a pin, it's actually going to show, it's going to look and feel like that full resolution imagery is in there with all of the metadata and all of your annotations associated with it, but it's actually pulling it instantly from the server, so you can email this to people in a really lightweight package. Another deliverable, and this one was inspired by the utilities. If you've ever seen kind of the reports from helicopter inspections, you'll know it's pretty no nonsense, right? It's literally just give me the spreadsheet of my assets, tell me what I got to go and do. And so we understand that, so we made it so you could download it. It's got the job, it's got, if you have a structure designation in there, that'll be part of it. The report link, so the report link's pretty cool because what you can do, or what your clients can do, is they can say, well, I only want to see the tags that are, let's say hot, or whatever the tags are that you created. And then based on that, they can say, well, I still don't believe, here's the note, they told me something was cracked or corroded or overheating. I got to see that for myself, and so they can hit that report link. It pulls up the original report. It pulls up that original image. It shows you the annotations. It'll circle it, and they'll be able to see all of that. So that's a really nice way for them to. It goes along with that paradigm of you give them all of the data that they paid you to go and take, but you're really highlighting for them what they actually need to see. Then another deliverable we have. That we found, this one's pretty popular for different industries, especially like oil and gas, and we've actually heard of people who will spend hours cutting and pasting. I was actually showing someone a demo of this and explaining that, and they said, you caught me in the middle of doing exactly this, which is cutting and pasting a bunch of images to try to create a report like this. Engineers especially, they generally want a final document that they can put their cover sheet on and sign and seal. And so what this does is it pulls all the annotations, all of the tags, high priority, all kinds of stuff, basically everything that's in that inspection interface, along with your logo, gives it to you as a docx. So a lot of times, depending on the industry, there's boilerplate language that you want to drop in, and then you resave that as a PDF and you send it to your client and get paid. So that's kind of another deliverable. So that's the report links, KMLs, Excel file. And then, of course, we have, we have the expert tool. So, for example, you can click on, if there's any sort of custom deliverable you want, or any sort of custom request you want, anything like that, you can click on it. And this basically pops open essentially a chatbot window where it says, okay, we're happy to help. What can we do for you? And you can type in any sort of advanced analysis you want, and I'll show you a bunch of examples of that in a second. So here I can say, can you, flag every image with temperatures greater than 50 degrees Celsius and put them in order of priority. Something like that. So something that, you know, maybe you don't really know why your client wanted it, maybe you do, but they just say, hey, can you do that for me? And so instead of trying to figure out how to do it, you can just type it to Raptor Maps, and then it'll say 1 moment. And then it'll come back with a quote and a timeline, and you can say, yes, I want to do this, no, I don't. And so what a lot of our customers actually use this for is for generating an estimate before they go into their client meeting. So they'll have an idea, they'll have collected some sample data, they'll have an idea of what it's going to cost, and then that way they can, and what the turnaround time is going to be, and that way they can make sure that they bill their client appropriately. So examples of things that we do, you know, adding in 3D structures. You know, we talked about the base maps. You know, you can actually do this yourself directly in the interface. Georeferencing, object detection. So a lot of this is kind of the machine learning part of Raptor Maps. So, you know, if you're just starting off, chances are you probably don't need to do some of this. Adding structures, this one seems, you know, kind of simplistic until you realize that you have a master service agreement with a utility and they just gave you, you know, 200 PLS CAD files embedded in a KML, and they want you to automatically tag it, things like that. So that's when it's pretty good for that. And of course, you know, a whole host of other things. So the idea here is that, you know, it should be, your operation should be very deliverables focused. You should really sit down with your clients and understand what they want. You should be able to explain to them all the different things that are out there, because chances are they don't necessarily know all the things that they can do. And at the end of the day, you know, you really want to teach them about your capabilities and help drive their bottom line.
This seems to me, Nikhil, this Raptor Map seems a little bit higher on the level of annotation, getting reports, doing things. This isn't quite just like a click button, here you go, easy thing. It seems like it's a little bit more complex in general. So my question is, or we do actually have a poll question, or a question here. What is the best way to learn about what you have to offer? We didn't, you know, besides your blog and other places, is there any tutorials or YouTubes basically to go to kind of learn a little bit more about your specific reports? It seems like a lot of information is what I'm saying. I think people get a little bit overloaded with Pix4D with all the nifty little things, but they really don't know how to get them there. What do you guys offer as far as education and stuff like that? Is the question from the.
Yeah, so a couple things with that. One is the expert button makes it really easy to literally, you know, upload, create your report. You basically say, you know, these are the images that I want to create a report based on, and then, you know, everything else you can either, you know, do yourself. You can hand it off to you know, a contributor, or you can just hit the expert button, or some combination. But customer support's a really big priority for us. So when people, both when we're teaching people about the software and the first time they use it, you know, generally we'll help them onboard. We'll step them through sample deliverables. It's not uncommon for us to get a call, you know, generally early morning or late night, of someone saying, hey, I'm about to go into a client demo. Can you help me generate a bunch of different deliverables, and, you know, what's the best thing for my industry? And so that's a big part of it for us. Yeah, and if you're currently a user, I mean, our users know that we're pretty available, so they have our phone numbers.
All right. Okay, what else do you have for us there, my man?
I think that's you know, I really want to hear from everyone else. I think that's kind of the big overview here. You know, that's our philosophy on how to generate deliverables and how to process your data quickly so you can get back to flying again.
Excellent. So as far as like I said, understanding the reports and going through that, everyone that's attending, again, it's kind of a one-on-one, kind of work with you, understand exactly how to move through the system and the deliverables in which you can share to your clients and customers. We do have a couple of Dusty Birch, because he's awesome, one of my guys out of Colorado. He does a ton of inspections, so thousands upon thousands upon thousands of images is what he basically told me. The analytics with trying to produce those to the reports, he does have a workflow option of trying to get through, but he was trying to figure out a way in a conversation we had, is basically figuring out a way to batch all of the thermal files to give them all the same, normalizing them all the same. I don't know if this is a deliverable that you can actually do, but I would like you to get in touch with Dusty at one point or another. But his question was, sorry, I didn't mean to ramble, but his question was, what deliverable would a thermal map be valued to a client, given that it's never been done before? Is there a need, or is it just a cool deliverable? So what have you been seeing from other people? Is it just a cool thing, or is it an actual deliverable that some of your users have been sending to you and getting the reports back? What have you seen, Nikhil?
Yeah, so we've seen, so there are a few different industries that this is particularly good for. First of all, we've seen both. So we've definitely, obviously, anytime you got something like this, marketing material is always going to be good. But particularly for solar, there's a need to localize the defects. And so that's where a map can be incredibly helpful. If you've ever looked through, thousands of solar images, they all start to look the same, and it's pretty difficult to keep track of what's going on. So
Sure.
That's pretty good, especially when you consider what defective panels are worth to an entire solar farm. Other areas that this is pretty good for, flat roof is nice. I would say not, maybe not necessary. It really depends on your client, because the nice thing about that is because the images are projected where you took them. Buildings tend to be pretty distinct.
So I think you may have already answered this one, but another question from Dusty is, do you need an RGB data set also when working with thermal, basically?
That's a good question. So not to actually make a thermal map, but I would recommend it if anytime you're about to point out some sort of thermal anomaly and make any sort of judgment based on it, you want to go to the replay booth of the RGB and just check your bases, make sure you're not just seeing dirt or some sort of something else that it could be before you say, oh yeah, this is definitely a different temperature than the surrounding area. So in that respect,
I talked about the SOP of again, people getting into wanting to do great big thermal maps. We just have to remember that some of the large maps that we have seen are not done by an XT. And we're specifically talking about an XT and a FLIRView Pro and some of the smaller UAS type cameras that are able to gather the data. There are some cameras that FLIR makes that is a little bit on the higher end that do sequential data filing and other information in which post-processing is a lot heavier and usually done internal with the company. But because, again, this is more specific to the XT and utilizing GPS points and cloud-based data, that kind of stuff, trying to get that much information and gathering it in thermal can be a challenge. So the question I see is using this SOP of RGB, specifically in a solar field, is to go out and actually do it all in RGB, and then go out and do a couple of the thermal anomalies that you actually see instead of trying to thermal map the whole thing. You might see some simple anomalies that you do, and we can then put this into Raptor Maps and create that report based on just a few thermal images instead of trying to map the whole thing. Like I said, there are some challenges to that. Anything that you would like to add to that, Nikhil, as far as RGB versus, gathering a lot of RGB is easy, is what I'm saying. Doing a lot of thermal is a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, one thing that we really like to do is we like to help our customers experiment. So this is why, and we didn't get too much into this, but we don't charge them if the thermal map doesn't come out. So if they're saying, look, I'm trying to find this very specific feature, like I'm trying to find this diode, and if I can find it on a thermal map, that's worth a lot to my client. But if but I have to fly at this altitude, and if it doesn't come out, then it's not really going to be useful to them. So we'll work with the hardware that they have, and oftentimes it is the RMUS XT, because that's a pretty common platform, and we'll see what we can do for them. So yeah, sometimes it is about experimenting and helping them deliver something that's actually going to be useful.
Okay. Another question I have from Leighton Fuller, a guy out of Florida. He is based on data syncing. Does Raptor Maps sync with Google Drive? I don't know if that's a question that you can answer, but based on data syncing, does Raptor Maps sync with Google Drive?
So it's not built into the UI yet. So we have Dropbox integrated, but Google Drive is coming for the upload. And then we do let users individually download the files and such. So if they want to put them back in the Google Drive, they can. Currently, there's not. Yeah, it doesn't sync going out. It does sync going in, but you can always download the files.
Excellent. Excellent. Let me see. There was another one here. Processing. This is from Chuck Petrus. Processing. My big problem is slow internet. Multi-hour uploads are the rule. Downside of living in a rural area. I can see this also. If everything is kind of processing, trying to get things, is trying to get the information to Raptor Maps in general, and then as well trying to upload it and get it to other things. So it's processing for him is a big problem, and trying to do that. Any advances that would give better value in trying to get this information to you?
Yeah, a couple different ways to do it. I mean, one is, using the uploader, really using the uploader to isolate the data that you even want to, put on the Raptor Maps platform.
Yeah, so I don't know if that was obvious, but the upload is a two-step process. First is to select what you want to upload by extracting all the metadata, and that's usually very fast, even on slow internet connections. So if you know you got a lot of photos, but you only want a few, you can use that feature first before you actually decide, okay, upload. I know some other software out there you have to upload everything at first, so that's one thing to help you out.
Yeah, and then the other one is, I mean, even really large companies like Amazon, they do have ways for people to mail in their data. Sometimes that can actually be faster, and so
yeah, we've seen that from a couple of our clients that do handle huge payloads. It's faster, even with fast internet connection. It's faster to mail a terabyte and upload a terabyte. So we do accept normal postal mail.
Okay, this kind of goes along with that same question. Very good question here, because this is a lot of security issues and problems that have come up. But from Neil Keown, I hope I said that right, Keown. Since this is cloud-based data, what privacy guidelines are in place as far as keeping the information private, not sharing? That has been a big issue with some of the cloud-based data versus doing internal processing. What kind of security measures or things like that have you guys done to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And with working with some enterprise clients, this is like one of the utmost features to them, or making sure that it is secure. You'll see a lot of big companies now are switching more to the cloud. From kind of our cloud service providers, it's getting more secure, and it is very secure, sometimes more secure than old hardware that some of these older companies have on site. So in terms of our privacy, like we have a privacy policy. You own the data when it's uploaded, so that we don't do anything there. So you keep that. In terms of like adding a contributor, nobody can see your data in your account unless they have your password. So if you pick a poor password, that there's not much we can do there. All of the passwords do get stored encrypted, so we don't even have your password. Once it's like created into the system, and then let's see. So yeah, when you share a job to somebody, you can revoke or release the job as you want. So there's kind of like user management or permissions built into the software. Yeah, from a data security standpoint, we meet most of the like utility standards by using Amazon Web Services. And then if you have really specific requirements, there's some oil and gas companies have super, like, the data can't leave the site. We will do like an on-site implementation and work in their environment. So there's kind of like, we have like many levels of what you can do for security. There's the cloud, but if some clients aren't comfortable with that, we can do like an on-site integration. Those tend to be more expensive, of course, because we have to actually go there. But that's kind of the range of things.
Totally makes sense. That's great. All right, so that answers some of those questions. Say, there was one really good question here from Sean Adams, hotspot mapping. Basically, what he's asking is there a way to identify and extract the individual hotspot with a geolocation of an individual picture or that spot? So, Nikhil, if you were to pull up one of your thermal single image.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually maybe something, if it doesn't exist at this very moment, but this is something that has actually been asked several times. So here I see that string,
Mm-hmm.
and the string there, that is something that comes up very common. Where is that? So can I have a geolocation of that specific spot? I think that is probably one of the more common questions I get. So we can see the whole thing, but where is it in the world besides just when the drone took the picture? But is there a way to isolate that string in a location geo-wise?
Yeah, so here the error is kind of related to the error of the GPS in your drone system. So if you have RTK, it can be very accurate. If you don't, sometimes you can be plus or minus, 5 to 10 feet. Or more sometimes, it depends where you are. But this is a great thing for the expert tool. So just as we can georeference entire maps and use like your ground control points, we can georeference individual images. So that means that every pixel in this image would have a geolocation. Like I said, it is a
that's
function.
awesome. That's really awesome, actually.
Thanks. Yeah, it is definitely a function of the error in your system. So sometimes for solar panels, they'd rather know like the string number or like the number of panels from the left or right is sometimes more useful than the lat long coordinate, but it just kind of depends.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a great question. It is something that has been requested many a time to fly over something or look at something, and even though the image, as we're looking at your image right now, has a whole lot of panels, where is that location? If that's something that can be pushed out, and specifically on, like this image, just an FYI, this image came from when we were doing I did a solar panel video last year, and this image specifically was one of, we could have done thousands upon thousands, and this is only a small space on nearly 500 acres, 220,000 panels. And so being able to isolate just this one little space and know where to tell them to go to fix it would be very helpful on the deliverable at the end. So anyway, that was just an FYI spot. But thank you for asking that specific question there, Sean.
John, before you, we want to keep answering questions, but just in case people have to drop off at 2, I did want to make sure they don't miss out on the contest. Can I
absolutely, absolutely. Let's talk about that for a second. Like I said, we can hang out for a little bit longer and answer a few more questions, but yes, let's look at the contest.
Yep. So so as a thank you for everyone tuning in today, we want to create a few free thermal maps for you. So the top 5 submissions are going to get a free map. So I'll explain how it works. Based on the guidelines on our website and some of your own practices, you may already be doing this, and you may already have a really good data set. Just take the most interesting data set you can find that you think we all want to see, something you'd be proud to put on John's Facebook group. Send us a link through our website. Doesn't matter if it's OneDrive, Google Drive, Dropbox, your own FTP, whatever you want to do. You've got a little over a week, so submissions close on Friday. So feel free to, we have had people call us from the field and say, hey, how do I adjust something like that? So, feel free to do that. And then a week later, we'll announce the winners and post the maps both on our website and on Facebook. So.
Fantastic.
Both on epicness, how cool was it? Was it a solar farm substation, something even better? And of course, image quality. Are you following good practices, taking nice, clean data sets that are mappable?
Yeah, that's super awesome. I do get a lot of pricing questions that are coming through. One is from my guy Howard Perry. His specific question, real quick, was guaranteed time priority processing. So we do have, we'll discuss a little bit about cost and sometimes generating reports. If you want to just touch that real quick, just kind of what you guys do in a general subscription standpoint to specialized doing, and then with Howard's question, what if I need it really fast? Can I pay a little extra money to get it as soon as possible?
Yeah, those are both great questions. So yeah, the way it works is that for the Raptor Maps, for everything besides the expert button, there's kind of a monthly maintenance fee. You can also get it from, for example, RMUS and a few other places, and you can get the 1-year package that has some credits and everything like that. But if you're just starting out, you already you may already have a thermal camera, things like that. That's a kind of, you can go monthly as well. And then for the expert button, so any of the expert deliverables, so let's say it's a radiometric map, it'll tell you exactly how much it's going to charge your card on file based on how big of a job it is. And to answer the question on timeliness, if you need something quicker, then if it's not 24 hours, if you're like, I need this in 12 or I need this in 6, instead what you would do is you'd actually use the custom request button on the expert tool, and you'd say, hey, I want a radiometric map, but it's got to be done faster. And then we would make sure that
based off of the workload time, we can provide a quote.
Yep.
Yeah. So basically, you're like me. You just work 24/7. Is that what you're saying?
Well, a lot of times the software will figure out what you want to do. It's if you got some sort of crazy request, then yeah, and it goes to a human. So the more you can act like a robot in your request, the better it is.
All right, we do have a lot of questions, and I'm sorry if I haven't really hit up on top of some of these. Some of these questions are more specific to me, doing imagery with certain type of cameras. I've got a 640-13. What can I see? There is another question here about using GPCs, whether you use GPCs in thermal or GPCs in RGB to get the better data. Would you guys recommend, in a general sense, using GCPs? That is a very, very, again, common question I get. Do I have to have them? Is it something I don't have to have? Just a real quick answer on whether or not GPCs are required.
So for anything that's approaching survey grade, yes. So we worked with the USGS before, and they were measuring beach erosion, and inches matter when you're calculating the volume of sand. So those are examples when you do. In the solar farms, it can help you localize better if your GPS isn't that accurate, if you don't have an RTK system. Most of the times for like commercial roof, transmission lines, it's not necessary. The maps get you pretty much most of the way there.
Mm-hmm. So in essence, like I said, I see a lot of people that don't use GCPs and maybe not getting the data. They blame the software or whatever, but in a recommended, depending on obviously the client and how accurate something needs to be, going out and actually having GCPs is fairly important if you need that level, is basically what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let me see if there's any other good questions we have here. Do you guys have anything else you guys want to do, or are we just good to kind of do the questions for the rest of the time?
No, we love the questions. We like hearing from people.
Okay, excellent. I'll just, did you have anything else you wanted to share on your screen there, Nikhil? Are you good to go?
No, you can switch it back to you.
I don't want to, not have everybody see me. That's not always the case when everybody wants to see John, but for the most part, like I said, let's go through a couple more questions here. From Nate Kearney. Will higher-end cameras produce more clarity in the thermal maps, and along with that, will they allow you to fly higher? If so, what kind of cameras and which drones can we fly with them? I did want to kind of ask in later, as far as your guys' ability to get good data. We've talked about that. Getting good data, what does that mean? And what images and what cameras and everything else. This would probably more be a John question, but are you seeing, as far as using different types of cameras, are you guys seeing anomalies that are all over the place? Is there a guideline that you guys have in order to do thermal mapping or thermal data gathering? Is there anything that you guys are finding that, because we did give you a camera, so is there anything that you guys have got that has been like, this sucks, it's not working well, to it is working well?
Yeah, so some of those things we posted on the blog, and yeah, we really, that was great that you gave us a camera, because we were able to, learn a lot of these lessons for ourselves, take imagery at a lot of different altitudes, things like that, and really understand, where, what's going to generate the best maps. And yeah, I think this is definitely a John question, but what I think you would say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that, the 640 is going to give you, I think 4 times the resolution roughly, right? So it's so much easier, and for us from a data processing standpoint, and I hate just saying telling everyone, hey, you got to go out and buy the the most expensive thermal camera, but really from a data processing standpoint, it makes it a lot easier to deal with those images.
Sure, I think you know, and when we're talking mostly on the inspection side, even though we had we're doing some SAR and things like that. We can talk a little bit about the apps that are out there and gathering the data and trying to get the data. My guy Leighton, again, doing some great data collection in our FLIR group that he's shared a little bit of different processors, but you guys don't actually make a mapping app to go out and gather it. You guys are just taking the information and processing it. So we'll try to see if we can come up with some better ways, or some, you know, you working with some of these customers to say, hey, with this camera, 640, the highest resolution, this setup, we are finding that this is the best way to get that information. I think that would be valuable to a point, but that's something we can touch on later, or in a popular blog of some sort. So
yeah, our baseline is 640 by 512 camera flown at 200 feet, shooting in RJPEG mode. That usually will produce a result, but that just is like, sometimes it's like, well, I want to fly at 80 feet because I really need to see the specific thing. Like, how can you help me here? Oh, and I forgot to mention, usually 80% front and 80% side lap for us. But yeah, there's a lot of people out there that have very specific needs that we kind of have to understand for what they're doing, what makes sense.
Yeah, and we definitely do want to, you know, at some point post a blog post on kind of the different flight software out there. But, you know, anecdotally, and you guys can tell me whether or not you agree with this, it feels like the past month or two, there's just been a lot of updates and things that'll work really well for people one day, may not necessarily work the next. So we kind of want that to cool down a little bit before we can post something where we can say, yeah, we're very confident in this.
Oh, sure, absolutely. Even the GS Pro app has got. I really like that app as far as just gathering the data, but there are some little niches and little things that make it a little bit more difficult to try and manage collecting the data. As far as good data goes in and good data comes out, do you guys ever like let your clients or customers know that, hey, you know what, that just wasn't a great data set and wasn't really worth, you know, how do you pre-filter that? How do you vet that? You know,
Yeah, so we have software that, you know, can right away detect, like, did you fly the right overlaps and things like that. But, you know, if someone comes to us and, you know, gives us something that's got, you know, I flew this at 30 feet with 10% overlap or something like that, I mean, right away, you know, we'll let them know that, hey, we know from our experience this isn't gonna work out. You know, we'll always attempt it if we think there's a reasonable chance it's going to come out, because it's no risk to the clients if for whatever reason it doesn't. You know, they're not out anything. So, but we will recommend, hey, you guys really should fly higher with a little more overlap next time.
Ah, I gotcha. We do have a little bit more complex question here, and again, I hope that if you guys aren't already part of Facebook and already part of my FLIR thermal group, send me a message. I'll put you into the group or add you to the group. Today we have 85 attendees that actually showed up today, which is great, and hopefully this information was helpful in getting out to you. But there are some very complex questions that I'd love to be able to answer, but I'm going to try to do those individually as later on with the webinar, sending those out. If for some reason you've missed portions of this or you weren't able to attend, we'll be recording this and we'll do some editing and get the information out there again to people. So yeah, I mean,
I just want to say a quick thank you to you guys, especially for both providing some of the input on what people are trying to do with thermal imagery as well as the actual camera. I mean, that's been great. Thanks to SST Solar for letting us use that data set, and they've been fantastic to work with. And then finally, Nate at Skyscape Imaging, who's really helped us with some of the data acquisition. So, want to make sure we give credit where it's due.
Yeah, I think in general, I think most people, like I said, don't know really where to start, where to go, and what to do. And that's really, you know, I like selling stuff. Believe me, that's how we stay in business. But I would rather people have the correct information, that they actually know, you know, what the best setup would be for them, and try not to spend money that they really don't need to on systems and deliverables that may not be really for them. You know, so I get pretty excited when other people feel the same way, that we really are trying to work on the industry and create things. And I don't like when other companies are just like, no, this is the best because this is what we did. You know, I am more than happy to listen to the feedback that people give me to go, this is crap, it didn't work well. And this is the reason, one of the biggest reasons I like working with Raptor Maps, specifically of listening to them listening to their customers, trying to culture and make the actual industry listening to the industry rather, and moving forward to give everybody a chance to kind of get there, if you will. So, it's what I like about this stuff. It's been really great. So let's see.
Well, we really appreciate it. Yeah, that's what we like about it too. You know, our favorite thing is when clients say, well, you know, I went and this asset owner wants to see something a certain way, and you know, we say, well, we'll see what we can do. And a week or even sometimes less than that later, we have the honor of calling them up and saying, hey, that feature you wanted, you know, go log in. It's
sure.
there now. So.
Yeah, sure. So there was just a couple of things. We'll be if you guys didn't have anything else, I was just going to wrap up with a couple of the things that are just coming out here shortly. Other webinars that we'll have in the future. It's been a little while since I've actually had a webinar, but I'm glad at the amount of attendees that actually jumped on this one. So real quick, let me see if I can get this. Let me see. Make this a little bigger for you guys. Chad, are you still watching over there? Sweet. Am I just a little thing up in the corner? All right. I was trying to figure out how to get that back to me, but that's okay. Of course, I'm not a webinar runner guy. I mean, I usually have somebody that does that for me. But anyway, behind me, you guys can see the M200. M200 is, we'll do another little bit more focused webinar. I've been doing a lot of testing on this. One of the things, because we are talking about the XT and XT actually working with the M200, there is going to be it'll be a little bit more difficult than just, did I end up going big? Sweet. Mikhail's awesome. He knows how to figure this stuff out. We ended up having to do some, according to DJI, having to change the way the XT is going to act on the M200, meaning that we will, as customers, we're going to have to send these in, have them modified. Any of the newer versions of the XT that are coming out right now that are ordered will basically be a V2 and work with that. Still need to have an adapter. So there will be some information that I'll be putting out there about using the XT on the M200. Not to be confused with the M210 and the M210 RTK. Probably one of the more important things here is to remember that the R210, the 210 is not available yet. We're still not looking at that until the end of September, October maybe. The 200 is available right now, but doesn't have all the same features as the 210 and the 210 RTK. Can you upgrade those to it? No, you cannot. You cannot upgrade each one to every one. It's pretty much an M200, M210, 210 RTK. So hopefully that answers that question. That I've been getting that a lot of. Another thing that we've had out there real recently is basically doing mobile charge stationing and having some kind of a simple charger that would help us just do easy stuff out there, running our iPads and stuff. So we'll have some information on this on the next webinar. And the last one I wanted to talk about was doing the big camera, the Phase 1 50 megabyte camera. So that will be a really cool webinar and kind of going through, understanding how it's set up and what it's doing and how to get that running right. So and what to expect out of a pretty awesome 50 meg camera. So some of the future things coming up. Again, I wanted to thank Raptor Maps, Mikhail, Eddie. You guys are awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being part of the webinar today. I will try to answer some of the questions that are further on to push them out and get them answered to you. So if you guys have anything else, any suggestions, anything like that, that'd be great. I do have one more poll question, and you guys, whoever's left here, can answer this. This just kind of helps us a little bit in kind of understanding where to go with some of the webinars, and as well as helping people like Raptor Maps that we invite into the information on what exactly to do. So don't be worried that I even care what you answer. But it does help us a little bit on understanding where and what information we need to provide. So I've only got like 6% yes. No, I'm just kidding. It's very high on the yes, so we did a good job.
That's when John just boots us off the webinar.
Okay, again, thanks guys for joining us and hanging out. We'll schedule another one. I'll push another one out here pretty soon, and we'll get some another more and great information out there. So appreciate it. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you.
All right, have a good one, everyone.
Take care.